My dinner with my husband was cut short by a vibration on my leg. An unknown number sent a chilling text message. It said to get up and leave the restaurant immediately, without a single word to him. I thought it was a wrong number until I glanced at my husband. He smiled, refilling my wine, and asked a terrifying question. You trust that I would never hurt you, right? At that moment, a horrible realization started to dawn. Staying any longer would destroy my life. I am so glad you found this story. Please let me know your city or country in the comments. Some facts have been changed, but the lesson here could save your life. The wine was a 2019 Bordeaux, a favorite Alexander picked for me. My glass looked like a red jewel in the dim light of the Harvest restaurant. I have always thought of myself as a practical person. An 18-month anniversary did not feel like it needed a $100 bottle of wine, but Alexander was set on celebrating. We deserve this, he told me that morning with a quick kiss before I left for a meeting. Just us, no interruptions. That is why we were at a quiet table in a top Cambridge restaurant on a cool Friday evening. It was the kind of restaurant where you saw famous professors and rich investors. At 32, I often felt much older than my age. I took over as chief executive officer of my parents' shipping business after they died in a car accident 2.5 years ago. The job left me feeling completely drained. Alexander, at 41, had a way about him that always captivated me. He had silver streaks in his hair, an honest laugh, and he was an amazing listener. He was telling me about a freight problem in Los Angeles, and I was just listening. His voice, along with the wine, was making me feel at ease for the first time in ages. That is when my phone vibrated. It was on the table, and I nearly ignored it. Alexander had wanted a phone free evening, but a strange instinct made me look at the screen while he sipped his wine. The text was from Nathan. I could not breathe. I had not talked to my older brother in 2.5 years. The last time we spoke was the day of our parents' funeral. He missed the entire event for a business deal in Singapore. I had blocked his number, unable to forgive him for leaving me alone when I needed him most. This text, though, was from a number I did not know. The message said, "Do not trust him. A black Honda is waiting for you outside." The message was so blunt it felt like I had been hit. I could only stare at my screen. I heard my own heart thumping in my ears. The quiet chatter of the restaurant and clinking silverware all disappeared, like I was suddenly underwater. Cass, is something wrong? Alexander's voice pulled me back. He watched me with that usual worried look, his fork paused midair. I had to make myself smile and put the phone away. Oh, it is just a work alert. I forgot to put it on silent. He seemed let down. He had a way of making me feel bad without a word. I thought we agreed. No work tonight. I know. I am sorry. You are right. I reached for my wine to steady my nerves, but my hand was trembling. The words echoed in my mind. Do not trust him. Why would Nathan send this after so many years of silence? It felt deeply wrong. I need to use the restroom, I said suddenly, sliding my chair back before I lost my courage. Alexander looked surprised, but he just gave a nod. Of course, take your time. I grabbed my purse and walked to the back of the restaurant, my heels tapping on the polished floor. The restrooms were down a corridor. I did not go in. Instead, I saw a small window with a view of the street. With shaking hands, I moved the curtain and looked out into the darkness. A black Honda Accord was parked across the road right under a bare tree. The car's window was rolled down and the dim streetlight revealed the driver. It was Nathan. He looked older, a bit heavier, but I knew it was him. A lump formed in my throat. Why was he here after all this time? I stood completely still, a mix of old anger and new confusion rising inside me. A powerful fear began to take hold. A memory came back to me. A year ago, I was pregnant for the first time. I was 10 weeks along and so happy, and then I had a miscarriage. I remembered the hospital, weeks of feeling totally exhausted and the weird yellow color of my skin that the doctor said was just stress. I recalled Alexander bringing me special vitamins each morning. He claimed they were the very best that money could buy. I also remembered the stabbing pains in my stomach that I tried so hard to ignore. Alexander said that some pregnancies were just very hard, and then I remembered so much blood. I pushed the awful memory away. It was over. It was in the past. Alexander and I had mourned our lost baby together and we had moved on. We were a happy couple, right? But Nathan's warning was stuck in my head. Do not trust him. I let the curtain fall and started walking back to the table. My thoughts were racing. Alexander was on his phone now, probably checking work emails right after he had told me not to. He put it away when he saw me coming and smiled. Are you feeling any better? No, actually, I lied, and the words came out easily. I think I might be getting sick. I am so sorry, Alexander. Can we please just go home? His smile disappeared for a second, but he recovered quickly. Of course. Let me just settle the bill. I waited while he paid, my heart racing. A part of me just wanted to sit back down and act like Nathan's text never arrived. I wanted to return to that comfortable, safe bubble where my biggest issue was my dinner choice. But another part of me, the one that remembered the sickness, the yellow skin, and Alexander's pills, knew I had to leave. When we got outside, the cold evening air hit my face. Alexander tried to take my hand, but I pulled it away. I pretended to look for my keys in my purse. I can get you a cab, he said, pulling out his phone. No, I answered, maybe a little too quickly. He looked puzzled by my tone. I tried to sound softer. I just need some air. I think I will walk for a bit. I need to clear my head. Cass, it is freezing. Let me just. I will be all right. I offered a small smile and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. Then I turned and walked off before he could argue. My legs felt shaky as I crossed the street to the dark car. I was walking to Nathan and to answers I was scared to hear. The last I heard was Alexander saying my name, his voice filled with confusion, but I did not look back. I could not. If Nathan was right, then my entire 18-month marriage was a lie, and it was all about to fall apart. As I got to the car, I saw Nathan's grim face in the shadows. I had a sick feeling my life was changing forever. Nathan's apartment had the scent of leather and old books. It was a large, expensive loft with exposed brick and tall windows with a view of the city. I just stood in the center of his living room. I did not want to sit down. My legs were unsteady. The drive over was completely quiet. Nathan kept looking in the rearview mirror, making sure Alexander was not following us. He was not. But now that I was here with the brother I had cut out of my life, I could not tell if I was finally safe or in even greater danger. Nathan was 38 now, and with gray starting to show in his hair, he looked more like our father. He pointed to a big couch, but I just crossed my arms and stood my ground. You have 5 minutes to explain what is happening, I told him. He took a very deep breath. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, and I know I failed you when our parents died. I was in Singapore closing a $40 million deal. I convinced myself I could not leave. The truth is, I was a coward. I was scared of the funeral and scared to see you. By the time I knew what a mistake I had made, you had already changed your phone number. Good, was all I said. My sharp reply hurt Nathan, but he did not push back. He just said, You are right, but you have to listen. I did not know you were married until this July, only 4 months ago. You just disappeared. All your social media was private, and you had a new number. There was just no way for me to find you. So I hired a private investigator just to make sure you were safe. When she told me your new name was Cassandra Pierce, I felt my stomach drop, my jaw locked. Why? Because 3 years ago in Singapore, a man named Marcus Pierce tried to swindle me. He proposed a shipping contract for $15 million, saying he had contacts in Eastern Europe. My business partner looked into him, and his entire identity was completely fake. We had lost touch, so I had never even seen his picture. I did not know his face until 4 months ago. That is when my investigator's software matched it to the man you call a husband. His words felt like a punch to my gut. I opened my mouth to argue, to insist he was wrong, but before I could speak, a nearby door opened. A woman stepped in. She looked to be in her early 40s with sharp eyes and short dark hair. She had the focused energy of a person who exposes lies professionally. She held a thick folder and offered her hand. My name is Diana Blackwood. I am the investigator your brother hired. Miss Morgan, I am terribly sorry, but your husband is not who he claims to be. I could only stare, completely stunned. That is impossible. His name is Alexander Pierce. We have been married for 2 years. Diana placed the folder on the coffee table. She opened it, showing photos, bank statements, and wire transfer receipts. Your husband's true name is Alex Petro. He is a professional swindler who uses at least 3 other identities. In the last 5 years, he has cheated 3 other women out of more than $10 million. And now he is attempting to do the exact same thing to you. The world seemed to fall away beneath me. I collapsed onto the sofa, my hands gripping the fabric. How much money did he take? Diana's voice was steady and serious. She told me he had already funneled $3.9 million into foreign accounts using fake companies, but that is not his primary goal. On Monday, he intends to use a fraudulent power of attorney. That document will let him steal $68 million from your family's trust funds. Once he moves that money overseas, you will likely never get it back. Nathan fell to his knees in front of me, his eyes begging, Cass, please just hear us out. I know this sounds impossible, but Diana has tracked this man for 4 months. It took so long because Alex is a ghost. He gets a new phone every 2 weeks, uses secret email, and rents homes with fake business names. He even alters his look, his hair, his weight, his glasses. The changes were subtle, so our software needed 2 months to connect his face to his other aliases. Diana handed me a grainy security camera photo. The man looked like Alexander, but he was not a perfect match. His hair was shorter, his glasses were thicker, and he had a different frame. Daniel Ashford, San Francisco, 2019. He took $4.2 million from his wife, Lauren Mitchell, before he disappeared. Diana went on. Then he was David Sterling in Seattle in 2020. He stole $2.8 million from Jessica Brennan. She took her own life only 6 months later. Another name appeared. Marcus Caldwell, Austin, 2021. He ruined Elizabeth Warren financially, taking $3.1 million on her business. I felt like I could not breathe. Why was he never arrested? Why did the police fail to act? Because he is incredibly clever, Diana replied simply. Each woman signed legal papers. They all authorized powers of attorney, investment deals, and prenuptial agreements. The police viewed these as domestic disagreements, not as crimes, Diana explained. By the time the women understood what happened, he was gone. He would already be in a new city with a new name, looking for his next victim. Nathan's voice grew soft. I tried to reach you in August. Your phone was turned off. I called your office, but your assistant said Mrs. Pierce was not accepting personal calls. I even drove to your house. A neighbor told me you and your husband were traveling. He cut you off from everyone perfectly. I could not tell you the truth without him knowing, so Diana and I had to wait. We had to have solid proof before coming to you. Diana pointed to the folder. 2 days ago, on October 23rd, I got into his secure email. I found a message to his partner, Vincent Hayes. The subject line read Friday, harvest dinner, move Saturday. That showed us he was preparing for the final transfer. If we had not reached you tonight, your entire fortune would be gone by Monday. My chest felt tight. The room began to spin as their words washed over me. Alexander, Alex, Petro, 4 other women, $10 million. Jessica Brennan killed herself. A dark thought inside me knew this explained everything. It was why he insisted on managing all of our finances. It explained how he gently pushed my friends away with reasons that always sounded so reasonable. It was why he told me to get rid of my vitamins after I lost our baby. I kept those pills because my intuition told me something felt wrong. You have 72 hours, Diana said softly. That is all the time we have. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is now on the case, but they need to catch him in the act. Wire fraud is a major federal crime. They must let him try to make the transfer on Monday. This requires you to go home, act as if nothing is wrong, and help us lead him into the trap. Tears clouded my vision as I looked at them. You are asking me to go home and lie to the man I love. Nathan squeezed my hand. We are asking you to save yourself. The law offices of Pembroke and Associates were on the 23rd floor of a glass skyscraper in Boston. At 11 o'clock on a Friday night, the whole floor was empty and silent. The only illumination came from the corner office. It cast long shadows over a large wooden desk and shelves filled with unread leather books. Nathan and Diana walked me through the quiet reception area. The sound of my heels echoed loudly on the marble floor with every step. Edward Pembroke was waiting for me at his desk. His glasses sat on his nose beside a cup of coffee that was now cold. At 67, he had silver hair and kind eyes. His calm, comforting presence was built on 40 years of fixing problems for others. He had been my parents' attorney, and now he was mine. After my parents passed away, he guided me through the hard task of managing their estate. I trusted Edward completely. He stood up when I came in, his face showing deep concern. Cassandra, Nathan called me. Please have a seat. I dropped into a soft leather chair as a deep weariness washed over me. Nathan and Diana sat down beside me. Edward settled back into his chair and put his hands on Diana's thin folder. I have looked at all the evidence, Edward said in a calm voice. It is overwhelming. It is undeniable. Your husband, Alex Petro, is committing wire fraud in several states. He has an associate named Vincent Hayes. Edward explained. Hayes is 61. He was disbarred in California in 2015 for forging signatures for his clients. These two men have opened 12 foreign accounts in 6 different countries. The money is hard to trace, but the path is there. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt tight. So you can arrest him now? You can bring him in tonight? Edward just shook his head. I wish it were that simple. But to convict him of federal wire fraud, the prosecutor needs to prove he planned the crime and then acted on that plan. The evidence we have now is circumstantial. We have the fake companies, the strange money transfers, and the forged papers, he explained. If we arrest him now, his lawyers will claim this is a simple domestic dispute. He will claim he was just moving money for tax purposes and that you approved it. He will say the whole situation is a misunderstanding. The case will collapse if we do not catch him in the middle of the illegal act. So, what should we do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We will set a trap, Diana said. Tomorrow, Edward will file an emergency request to freeze all of Alex's accounts, including his fake business accounts. It will happen without any warning. He will not get an alert before it happens. On Monday morning, Alex will attempt to move the money and will find all his accounts are frozen. In his panic, he will immediately call Vincent. They will scramble to find another option, and at that point, they will try the transfer again. Diana clarified. The Federal Bureau of Investigation will be listening to their entire conversation. The second he starts that transfer, he is caught. Nathan leaned forward. But Cass, for this plan to work, you have to go home. You must behave as if everything is fine. You need to act like you have no idea what is going on. The mere thought of it made me sick. For how long? 3 days, Edward replied. Just until Monday morning. I know this is a huge thing to ask, but it is the only way we can guarantee a conviction. I looked down at my hands, thinking of going back to that house. I imagined lying next to Alexander in our bed, smiling at him in the morning, knowing he was trying to destroy me. But what if he gets suspicious? What if he knows that I am not telling the truth? That is exactly why we need your consent for surveillance, Edward said. He slid several documents across the desk to me. The first one is a medical information release. It gives Diana and the Federal Bureau of Investigation permission to look at your medical files from October of 2023. He clarified. We need to see the reports from your hospital visit after your miscarriage. If Diana is right and Alex was messing with your prenatal vitamins, it will add more proof to his pattern of fraud. I felt like I could not get enough air. I had tried to ignore that horrible thought, but now it was real. Second, Edward continued, is a financial disclosure form for our forensic accountant. The final approval they required was mine for the electronic recording. Federal cases can overrule state laws, which normally need consent from all parties. A federal agent showed me a small device to wear. It ensured every word from Alexander could be used in court. Diana revealed a tiny black box the size of a matchbook. You will wear this under your shirt, she said. We will hear everything in real time. If you think you are in danger, say the word August. We will come in and get you immediately. My hand trembled as I reached for the pen. I signed the release forms for my health, my finances, and then the surveillance consent. Each signature felt like taking another step closer to a cliff's edge. Edward collected the papers with a look that was both firm and kind. You are doing the right thing, he assured me. It may not feel like it now, but you are. When will you freeze his bank accounts? Nathan wanted to know. Edward looked at the clock on the wall. It was nearly 2 in the morning. I will file the orders through the system within the hour, he answered. The freeze will be instant across the federal network. Alexander will have no idea until he tries to get money on Monday. He also said every single one of his accounts will be locked. He will not be able to get a single penny. I tried to stand, but my legs felt weak. The incredible stress of it all was making it hard to catch my breath. I have to go home, I said. He will be wondering where I have been. Nathan stood up at the same time I did. I can give you a ride. I immediately shook my head no. If he is watching the house, he will see your car and have questions. I need to get a taxi. Diana gave me a business card with her personal cell phone number. Call me if anything at all changes, she said with a firm voice. Edward walked me to the door and put a hand on my shoulder. You are much stronger than you think, Cassandra. You have endured things that would destroy other people. You can do this. I could only manage a small nod, unable to speak, as I walked into the hallway. The elevator ride down felt like it took forever. Outside, the black of the night was just starting to turn a dark gray. I waved down a cab and told the driver where I lived. I rested my head on the cold glass of the window and shut my eyes. In only a few hours, I would have to go into my home and smile at my husband. He was a man who lied to me from the very first day I met him. Now I had to make coffee for him and pretend I was interested in his day. I needed to act like my entire life was not completely falling to pieces. I just had to hold myself together long enough to see him finally pay for what he did. I used my own key to get in the door at 7 o'clock that morning. Our house on Beacon Hill was perfectly silent when I entered, but my heart was pounding inside my chest. The kitchen lights were on, which told me that Alexander was up. Of course, he was up. I had been missing from our home for almost 12 hours. He would never let that happen without demanding an explanation. I set my purse on a little table near the door. My hands were shaking while I removed my coat. The federal agent's recording device was taped tightly against my skin, hidden by my blouse. The small object felt huge and obvious, like it was screaming my secret out loud. I had practiced my cover story over and over in the taxi. I had planned out every single word, adding small details to make it believable. But now, walking into the kitchen, the story just felt weak and unbelievable. He was standing by the coffee machine when I entered. He was wearing the same clothes from yesterday, and his hair was a total mess. He looked tired and maybe a little bit scared. When he looked at me, his face showed both relief and confusion. Cass, thank God, where have you been? He asked me. You just vanished from the restaurant, but your purse was still there. I was trying to call you all night long, but you never picked up. I made myself look straight into his eyes and kept my voice calm. I am very sorry. I began to feel unwell and needed to step outside for some air. I just started walking and then I got very dizzy. Nathan happened to be driving right past me. He saw me and brought me back to his place so I could rest. Alexander's expression hardened as soon as I said my brother's name. Nathan, he said, as if the name itself tasted awful. You two have not talked for years, and he just happened to be there for you. That sounds very convenient. It was a complete coincidence. I went to the sink for a glass of water, trying to give myself a moment. My mouth felt incredibly dry. He was on his way home after working late. I know you dislike him, but he is still my brother. I was not feeling well. What other choice did I have? Alexander just stared at me for a long time. It was not possible to know what he was thinking. At last he breathed out a heavy sigh and ran a hand through his hair. You should have just called me. I would have come for you. I know. I am sorry, I said, putting my glass down to look at him. The whole night was just too much for me. The anniversary, feeling sick. I suppose I just panicked, but I am okay now, I promise you. He came closer and softly tucked a piece of hair behind my ear. It was a gesture I knew so well, but it sent a cold feeling all through me. You really scared me, he said with a quiet voice. I was worried something terrible had happened to you. I made myself lean into his touch and gave him a faint smile. I am fine, truly. We just stood there for a second as the morning sun poured into the kitchen. For a brief moment, I almost believed my own act. I almost let myself forget we were not a regular couple working through a bad night. I almost forgot that this man was planning to steal all of my money and then leave. Let me get you something to eat, Alexander offered, stepping away from me. You look completely worn out. Coffee would be wonderful, I told him. I walked to the counter and got the French press we used every day. My hands trembled so much that I could barely move, so I focused on the simple job of making coffee. I measured the coffee, poured the hot water, and put the grounds into the pot. The familiar actions helped to calm me down. It was a distraction from the recording device on my body and the fear twisting in my stomach. As the coffee brewed, a memory from the past October suddenly came back to me. I was 10 weeks pregnant and felt a happiness so strong it made the morning sickness seem small. I was always tired. My skin had a strange yellow color, but the doctor in the emergency room said it was just from stress. He told me some pregnancies are just more difficult. Alexander was so caring during that time. He had found special prenatal vitamins online for me, telling me they were the absolute best. I took one every day, exactly as he said. I continued to take them even when they made me feel sick and when the sharp pains in my abdomen got worse. And after that, I had a miscarriage. There was so much blood and then a rush to the hospital. The loss left a huge emptiness inside of me that took a long time to heal. Now, a year later, I looked at the coffee maker as a terrible chill went through me. What if Nathan was right? What if Diana was right? What if those pills were never vitamins at all? Cass, are you okay? Alexander's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I looked down and saw I was spilling coffee all over the counter, making a dark mess. I quickly got a towel to clean it up. Yes, sorry, I am just so tired. He took the French press out of my hands and his fingers brushed against my own. Why do you not go and get some sleep? I have a few papers to look over, but we could go out for a late lunch. Maybe that new French restaurant. This was my opening. Paperwork. You said something about the bank. Is there anything I need to sign? For just a moment, a strange look crossed his face. It was a quick flash of calculation, or maybe it was panic. Then he gave me a casual smile. It is nothing, just some normal updates for the trust. It is not important. I can take care of it. Are you sure? It is no trouble at all, I said, keeping my voice casual. I mean, it is my money too. I think it is a good idea for me to know what is happening. It is just boring legal papers, he said with a small wave. Edward sent some documents about our investments. I plan to look them over this weekend. We can talk about it all next week. Please do not worry about it. I smiled at him and changed the subject, but my gut was screaming at me to demand answers. Okay, I said, I trust you. He seemed to instantly relax. I know you do, he said back. I looked at my phone like I was just checking for new messages. I held it under the table and sent a short text to Nathan. Phase 1 is done. Then I looked back at Alexander with a big smile. So, about that lunch? I am suddenly really hungry. That sounds perfect, he said, and then he leaned over and kissed my forehead. We both pretended that everything was normal for the rest of the morning. He went into his office with his laptop. A book rested on my lap, but the words were a complete blur. Around noon, with the fall sun lighting up the room, Alexander mentioned we should probably go. Right then, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. He looked at the screen and his whole demeanor shifted. The color left his face and his mouth set into a grim, hard line. For 5 solid seconds, he just stared at the device. Then he stood up suddenly, turning his back on me, and walked directly into his study. I held my breath and waited until I heard the soft click of the door. Only then did I reach for my own phone. A new message from Nathan was waiting. It said, "The accounts are frozen. He just got the notification. Prepare yourself." I did not move from the sofa, the book a heavy weight on my legs. The whole house felt silent and tense. Alexander stayed in his study. First 5 minutes passed, and then 10. The only things I heard were the squeak of his office chair and the low hum of his voice. I could not make out what he was saying, but the panic in his tone was obvious. He had the voice of a man whose careful plans were collapsing. I stood up from the sofa, placed my book on the cushion, and quietly moved into the hallway. I saw the study door was not fully closed. A thin ray of light shone from the opening. I flattened myself against the wall, and his words became crystal clear. All 6 of them, Alexander said, his voice tense while he walked around the room. His footsteps were quick and angry. They froze everything. She is aware of it, Vincent. She has to be. He paused to listen to the phone. I was not able to hear Vincent's response. Alexander's next words cut right through me. I do not care about how. We might have 48 hours left. He paused once more. If she calls an attorney, no, we are switching to plan B. On Monday, I will claim there was a system glitch. I will get her to the bank to sign the forms. As soon as she signs, we wire the money to an offshore account before she even knows what happened. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to run in there and scream at him. But I remembered what Edward told me. Play dumb. Let him think he is in control. I quietly moved away from the door and sat down on the sofa again. 10 minutes later, Alexander came out of the study. I had a book in my hands and a peaceful look on my face. Hey, he said, standing by the door frame. He offered a weak smile, but his eyes were full of worry. Sorry about that, he said. Just a little fire to put out at work. I kept my own voice light and casual. Is everything all right? Yes, it is just a client who is upset about some documents. It is not a big deal. He went into the kitchen and drank a glass of water very quickly. I could see his hand trembling. You seem pretty stressed. Are you sure? He was firm about it. I am fine. He placed the glass on the counter with a loud crack. I think I will skip lunch. I have to concentrate on this. I gave him a supportive nod, just like a good wife would. Of course, you do what you have to do. He disappeared back into the study. The second the door clicked shut, I opened my computer. Edward had directed me to a secure portal for tracking the money. My own hands were shaking as I typed the password. A page appeared with a list of 6 accounts. Each one had a single word in bold red letters. Frozen. The first 3 were offshore accounts in the names of fake companies. The balances were $8 million, $7 million, and $9 million. That came to $24 million. This was all the cash he had stolen from my business and my family over the past 18 months. He created false invoices for non-existent services. I had never bothered to look because my trust in him was absolute. The other 3 accounts contained my parents' entire life savings. Alexander had talked me into letting him manage it to reduce their tax burden. In those accounts were 15 million, 6 million, and $13 million. This meant another $44 million had been inaccessible since 6 o'clock that morning. The full amount came to $68 million. Every penny I was supposed to inherit was now tied up. I leaned back in the chair and just stared at the numbers. A chilling wave of clarity washed over me. It was all real. Nathan and Diana were not wrong. My husband, the man I had given my heart to, had been planning to destroy me since our very first meeting. The rest of Saturday is hard to remember. Alexander did not leave his study except to grab a quick meal or more coffee. He refused to look me in the eye. That evening, the tension in our house was so thick you could feel it. I pretended to be exhausted and went to my room early. I was awake until 3 in the morning, listening to his restless pacing downstairs. Sunday started out cold and gloomy. The sky was a dark gray that threatened rain. The smell of fresh coffee led me to the kitchen, where Alexander was waiting. He was dressed and looked calm, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He was failing to hide his worry. "Good morning," he said as he passed me a mug. I took the warm cup. "I have something to tell you." My stomach twisted into a knot. "Okay." He began to spin his story. "I just got a call from my investment manager. There was a computer error at the bank and it locked a bunch of accounts. Ours were affected," he continued. "It is just a small problem and very easy to take care of. We just need to stop by the bank on Monday morning and sign a couple of forms to clear it up. The whole thing will take less than 10 minutes. Are you free to do that?" I looked directly into his eyes and saw nothing but his panic. He was acting so casual about it, and I felt disgusted that he believed I would accept such a ridiculous story. He honestly thought I was a fool who would go and sign away my entire future. "Of course," I answered, making sure my voice was even. "What time do you need me there?" I could see the relief spread across his face. 10 o'clock. I will make the arrangements." I produced a small smile and drank some coffee. "That is fine. You know that I trust you, Alexander. Just tell me what to do." He reached for my hand and squeezed it. "Thank you. I really depend on you." I squeezed back, digging my nails into my own hand. The feeling is mutual. As soon as he walked away to refill his mug, I sent a fast text to Nathan. "Monday, 10 in the morning." The response came back in a second. "We will be there." I put my phone away and watched Alexander. He was staring at his own phone, lost in his own world. He had no clue that he was walking right into his own snare. That afternoon, while he took a nap, I went into his study and locked the door behind me. The sound of the bolt sliding home felt final. I then opened Diana's list of 3 names and phone numbers on my laptop. These were the names of other women he had deceived. The first was Lauren Mitchell, who lived in San Francisco. Her telephone number was 415-555-0147. The time in Boston was 10 o'clock in the morning, which meant it was only 7 in the morning for her on the West Coast. It was early for a Sunday, but Diana insisted they were expecting my call. I pressed the numbers before I could talk myself out of it. A self-assured voice answered on the first ring. "This is Lauren." I took a steadying breath. "Hello, my name is Cassandra Morgan. Diana Blackwood passed along your number. My apologies for the early call, but she mentioned you could tell me about Alexander Pierce." The line was quiet for a long moment. Then her question hit me like a ton of bricks. "Are you referring to Alex Petrov?" The new name was a shock. "Yes. How long were you with him?" 18 months, I told her. She paused again. "And this is the first you are learning about him?" My throat was tight. Diana's private inquiry started just 4 months ago. I was kept in the dark until Friday night. Lauren sighed, but it sounded a bit like a laugh. "That certainly sounds like him. He is a professional. I only learned the truth after he disappeared with everything I owned." I said, "Diana said that he stole $4.2 million from you." 4.2, Lauren repeated. Her voice was hollow and had no emotion. "He did it in 8 months. We met at a grief support group. My husband had died from a heart attack just 6 months before. I was completely lost and an easy target. Then he came along using the name Daniel Ashford. He told me his wife passed away from cancer. I felt like he was the only one who could understand my pain. We were married 3 months after that. I gave him complete power of attorney 6 weeks into our marriage. His excuse was that it was for financial planning in case there was an emergency. It sounded perfectly reasonable back then," Lauren said, and she laughed, but it was a harsh sound. "Then one morning in January of 2020, I woke up and he had vanished. My bank was empty. He sold all of my stocks. He even stole my daughter's college savings. I told the police, but they informed me that no crime had occurred. Because I had signed the papers and he was my husband, they said they could not do anything." "But the whole thing was based on lies," I protested. "That is not enough to get a busy prosecutor's attention. Their advice was to hire an attorney and take him to court." The issue was that Daniel Ashford was not a real person. He had no social security number, no job record, no real address. By the time I found that out, he was already hunting for his next victim. My hands began to tremble. "I am so incredibly sorry that you went through that." Lauren's voice became firm. "Do not feel sorry. Help me make sure this ends," Lauren asked. "Diana told me that the Federal Bureau of Investigation is involved with your situation. She also said you are helping to set a trap for him. Is that right?" "Yes, that is correct," I answered. "Everything is scheduled for tomorrow morning. He is expecting me to sign documents that will release all the money, but federal agents are going to be there. The instant he makes a move on those funds, they will take him into custody." "Good," Lauren said. Tell me how I can help. I told her exactly what we needed. We need you to give a formal statement. Diana is positive that if we can show a clear pattern of this crime in several states, he will go to prison for a very long time. This was far more than a simple con, it was a criminal operation. Lauren's voice was resolute as she spoke. I am in, just tell me what to do. I will give depositions, testify, anything at all. He ruined my life. I will do whatever it takes to put him in jail. I felt a tremendous weight lift from my shoulders. Thank you. Lauren's tone softened. But there is something else. He found another woman after me. Her name was Jessica Brennan, and she was from Seattle. Jessica is gone. She took her own life in March of 2021. That was 6 months after Alex David Sterling took everything from her. I found out too late. I tried to contact her family, but her sister would not speak with me. I do not blame her. What can you say when you find out a man you love drove someone to die? I raised a hand to my mouth to stop the tears. I promise you, he will pay for what he did to her. I really hope you are right, she replied. We talked for about 10 more minutes. Lauren explained his entire method to me. She went over every single warning sign she had missed. She told me how he gradually pushed her away from her friends and family. The process was so slow that she did not realize what was happening until she was completely cut off. When we finally hung up, I felt utterly drained, but a new, powerful sense of resolve was growing inside me. I was not facing this by myself. Lauren had made it through. I could make it through too. My next call to Elizabeth Warren in Austin felt much more difficult to place. Elizabeth picked up on the fifth ring, her voice full of suspicion. Miss Warren, my name is Cassandra Morgan. I got your number from Diana Blackwood. I know who you are, Elizabeth said, her voice sharp and cold. Diana already called. You are his newest wife. His soon-to-be ex-wife, I corrected her. And I plan to make sure he is stopped for good. Well, good luck with that. I lost a year of my life trying, and it did absolutely no good. I took a slow, steadying breath. I am not doing this alone. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is involved now. They have already frozen his bank accounts. They plan to arrest him for wire fraud in the morning. For the charges to hold, we need witnesses. We need people to prove this is his pattern, not a one-time mistake. The silence on her end of the line stretched on for a very long time. Why should I do that for you? Why would I want to relive the worst time in my entire life in a courtroom? Because Jessica Brennan no longer has that choice, I said. The other end of the phone went completely still. Finally, she asked, What do you need me to do? I explained the entire plan to her. By the end of our conversation, Elizabeth had agreed to testify. Her voice was still hesitant and shaky, but she was committed. She had lost her restaurant, her lifelong dream, and 3 years of therapy had not fixed her ability to trust people. But she would do this for Jessica. That evening, Diana called me. I told her, I have spoken to both of them. They are with us. Good. There is something else you should know, Diana said carefully. Another victim, a doctor in Seattle, is named Margaret Ellis. She is different from the others. She is an undercover FBI agent. We placed her inside 18 months ago to record Alex's every move and to learn his strategy. The information left my head spinning. This had been a federal investigation since 2022. After Jessica died, her sister convinced the Seattle office to look into it. They saw that her case was one small part of a much bigger scheme. They had been gathering proof against him for years. At 8 o'clock that night, Diana created a group chat for me, Lauren, and Elizabeth. Lauren sent the first message. It said simply, for Jessica. Elizabeth answered right away, for all of us. I looked at my screen at the names of 3 women connected by one man's lies, and I typed, let us finish this. I barely slept that night. I was wide awake by 5 on Monday morning, staring at the ceiling and watching the clock. 10 o'clock was only 4 hours away. 4 hours until the trap would be sprung. 4 hours until Alexander would stroll into that bank so sure of his victory. 4 hours until the FBI would finally get him. In 4 hours, my entire life was about to change. A knock came at the door at 6 in the morning. 3 quick raps shattered the quiet in the house. I was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a cold cup of tea, just waiting. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. My brother Nathan was on the porch holding 2 cups of coffee. His face looked weary and grave in the early light. I opened the door. What are you doing here? We have to talk, he said. He gave me one of the coffees and came inside, his voice a quiet whisper. Is he still asleep? I looked toward the stairs. Yes, he is still up there. What is happening? Nathan walked past me into the living room. He put his coffee on a side table and turned to face me. There are some things I should have told you on Friday. Diana and I did not want to worry you more, but since you are about to walk into that bank, you deserve to know everything. I sat down on the couch, my heart beginning to race. What things? He took a long, heavy breath, and for a second he looked much older than his 38 years. When our parents died, their lawyer managed the estate. You inherited nearly everything: the business, the trust, this house. My portion was much smaller. I never challenged it because I assumed they wanted one person to run the company, but a few months ago, after I hired Diana, I examined the official court documents and I found something out. Found what? I am adopted. The words just hung there in the silent room, feeling strange and heavy. All I could do was stare at him, completely shocked. What? Mom and Dad never said anything. They never told either of us, but it is there in the official county records, a sealed adoption from 1986 when I was 2 years old. They always treated me like their own son, and I never had any reason to believe otherwise. But I am not their biological child. My thoughts were racing. Why would they hide that from you? I do not know. Maybe they were waiting for the right moment and it just never came. Or maybe they did not believe it was important. His voice trembled a little. But it was very important to Alexander. Diana discovered emails on his hidden server. Soon after you met 2 years ago, he hired a private detective. That detective was the one who found the adoption papers. Alexander was planning to use that information to challenge the will. He wanted to claim you had manipulated our parents into giving me less of the inheritance. He would have portrayed you as a greedy, scheming person. A long legal battle would have tied up the estate for years, wasting the money on legal fees. When it was all over, he would have taken the money to an offshore account and disappeared. I felt as if the ground had disappeared from under me. You are my brother. It does not matter to me at all if you were adopted. You are my brother. Tears started to well up in Nathan's eyes. I know, but Alex saw it as a weakness, and he has been preparing this con for a lot longer than we realized. How much longer? Nathan took out his phone and showed me a file from Diana. 3 years ago, I was in Singapore to finalize a $40 million shipping deal. At a business function, a man named Marcus Pierce came up to me. He claimed to work for a logistics firm in Eastern Europe. He proposed a plan to reduce our shipping expenses by 30%, but he required a $15 million upfront investment to grow his business. The entire offer felt suspicious. My business partner investigated him. Marcus Pierce was a phantom. He had no business registration, no tax history, and his passport was fake. We turned down his offer and called the local authorities, but he vanished before they could find him. My mouth felt completely dry. Are you saying that man was Alexander? I am 100% sure. Diana put the security video from the event through facial recognition software. The program confirmed it was him. His hair was different and he was a little heavier, but the face and his gestures were an exact match. He was sizing me up, Cass, to see if I was an easy target. When I did not take the bait, he backed off. Then he learned I had a rich younger sister who was inheriting a fortune, so he switched to his plan B. Why did you not tell me? The question came out more harshly than I had meant. If you knew he tried this 3 years ago, I did not know, Nathan said, his voice thick with regret. I didn't have a photo of him, not even his real name. There was no way for me to link Marcus Pierce to Alexander Pierce until Diana's software made the connection. And by that point, you had already been married to him for more than a year. I tried to contact you last August. I called your old number, but it was disconnected. I called your work, and they said Mrs. Pierce was not accepting personal calls. I even drove to the house, but a neighbor told me you and your husband were traveling overseas. He had cut you off from the world. I had no way to warn you without him finding out. So Diana and I chose to wait for solid proof. My hands started to tremble again. This all started in Singapore. It might have been even earlier than that. Nathan then showed me another file. It was a blurry photo of a little girl on a sailboat at a summer camp, smiling at the camera. At first, I did not see myself in the photograph. Then I understood that it was me. Diana explained she discovered it on Alexander's private online profile. The photo was taken 15 years ago in Bar Harbor, Maine. I was only 17, attending a sailing camp my parents chose. Alexander served as a guest instructor that summer. He saved that photo of me for so many years. He had been watching me since I was a teenager. The room started to feel unsteady. I held onto the sofa to keep my balance. A horrible sickness washed over me. This could not be real. He was more than a liar, he was a monster. Diana also discovered a computer document with 23 names. All were children from wealthy families he encountered between 2008 and 2015. Beside my name was a chilling note. It said, "Wait for inheritance." I felt like I could not breathe. The man I married, the man I thought I loved, had been tracking me for 15 years, waiting for the right time. and I had walked right into his trap without knowing a thing. Nathan dropped to his knees and took my hands. You did not know, he said. You had no way of possibly knowing. But you understand the truth now, and in 4 hours we will ensure he is stopped. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I picked it up, feeling empty inside. It was an alert from my doctor's office. Your test results are available, pregnancy test. My hands shook as I opened the message. The results confirmed that I was pregnant. About 6 weeks along, my whole life seemed to stop in that moment. I was having a baby. Nathan must have seen the look on my face. Cass, what happened? I was too stunned to speak, so I handed him the phone. He looked at the screen and his worry turned to pure shock. Oh no. My mind raced to connect the dates. 6 weeks ago would be the middle of September. That was when my husband Alexander and I were trying for another child after my miscarriage, or at least that is what I thought. What if losing our first child was not a terrible accident? What if he caused it? I could not bear to finish that awful thought. Nathan spoke in a low, urgent voice. We need to tell Diana and Edward. This changes our entire plan. How? My voice was barely a sound. How does this change anything? He will use this child against you if he finds out. He could demand custody and visiting rights. It is just one more way for him to control you, even from prison. I stared at my phone. The happy news it displayed now felt like a life sentence. In only 4 hours, I had to walk into a bank and see the man who followed me since I was 17. The man who poisoned me, stole my money, and built a life of lies with me. And now I carried his child. My hands trembled too much to set the phone down. I stood and walked to the stairs before Nathan could stop me. One awful idea had taken hold of my thoughts. I had to find out if it was true. I needed to know the answer before I lost all my courage. Cass, wait! Nathan called from the bottom of the stairs, his voice full of concern. What are you doing? I could not voice the thought out loud. Not yet. I went into our bedroom, walked past the perfect bed where my husband slept by himself, and went to the closet. On the highest shelf, tucked behind old sweaters, was a small wooden box from my mother. I pulled it down and took it to the study, away from our room. Nathan came in behind me and gently shut the door. What is that? I could only force out a single word. Proof. I sat on the small couch and lifted the lid. Inside was everything I could not bear to part with after the miscarriage. There was a blurry ultrasound picture of a tiny form at 8 weeks. A hospital bracelet from Massachusetts General dated October 15th, the night we lost our baby. Buried underneath tissue paper was a pill bottle. The label read Prenatal Complex Premium Formulation. The bottle seemed heavy in my palm like a silent accusation. Alexander had insisted I throw it away after I lost the baby. He said we needed to remove painful reminders so we could move on. But a part of me refused. Maybe it was sadness, or perhaps a small voice already felt something was wrong. I secretly took it out of the trash and kept it. Nathan looked at the bottle. Do you believe he poisoned you? I am not sure. My fingers trembled as I twisted off the cap. About a dozen green and white capsules were inside. They looked just like the vitamins I had taken every morning, but now I would finally learn the truth. I used my phone to look for forensic toxicologists near Boston. The first result was Dr. Raymond Keller at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab. I dialed his number and a woman picked up on the third ring. I have to talk to Dr. Keller. It is an emergency. He is in a meeting right now. May I take a message for him? Please tell him it is about a poisoning. It concerns prenatal vitamins used to cause a miscarriage. I need them analyzed today. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then she said, "One moment, please." About 2 minutes later, a crisp, professional voice came on the line. This is Dr. Keller. You said something about a miscarriage. I quickly told him everything. I explained losing the baby, the special vitamins Alexander gave me, and the strange sickness I had dismissed at the time. Dr. Keller listened without interruption. When I was done, he said, Can you send me pictures of the bottle and the pills? I need clear photos of the label and the capsules themselves. I sent them right away. Focusing on a task helped to calm my hands. He phoned me back 5 minutes later. Morgan, I am looking at your pictures. This label is not real. It is missing a federal approval code, a lot number, and the maker's address. It also looks like these capsules were filled by hand. The powder inside is not consistent. Do you have the pills? Yes, I have the entire bottle. I quit taking them after I lost the baby. I need you to send me 3 of the capsules by overnight mail. I will run a complete phytochemical screen. But based on what you told me, I am fairly certain I know what this is. What? Pennyroyal oil and black cohosh. They are both herbs that can end a pregnancy. People have used them for centuries, but they are very dangerous. Pennyroyal is known to cause extreme liver damage. Taking these for weeks would explain your exhaustion and sickness. At 10 weeks pregnant, That dosage would have almost certainly ended the pregnancy. The room felt unstable again. I reached for the sofa to steady myself, but the hospital ran tests, a toxicology screen. They did not find anything. A standard emergency room test does not look for herbal substances. They check for alcohol, illegal substances, heavy metals, and common poisons. To detect something like pennyroyal, you need a very specific phytochemical test. It runs about $2,000 and takes 3 to 5 days. Doctors will only request that test if they strongly suspect herbal poisoning. Nathan had been quiet this whole time, but now he spoke. What about her liver? She mentioned she was tired and had pain. Would her blood work from that time reveal anything? Yes, absolutely. If Miss Morgan can get her hospital records from October 2023, I will look at them. I opened the patient website on my phone that Diana had shown me. The discharge summary was right there, and I emailed it to Dr. Keller. I could hear him typing, and then he let out a low whistle. Your ALT level was 7,268. A normal level is under 40. This shows you had significant liver damage. The emergency room doctor likely thought it was from the stress of pregnancy, a reasonable guess without all the facts. But with your timeline and symptoms, this is a textbook case of pennyroyal poisoning. You were very lucky you stopped taking those pills. A few more weeks could have led to complete liver failure. I shut my eyes as the terrible truth settled in. Last October, I was 10 weeks pregnant and the happiest I had ever been, but my body was slowly shutting down. I remembered the crushing, deep exhaustion, the yellowish color of my skin the nurse dismissed, and the sickness that was much worse than morning sickness. And every single morning, Alexander would give me those pills with juice and a kiss. Take care of yourself, honey. The baby needs a healthy mom. I had trusted him with my life, and he was murdering our child one pill at a time. Send the pills, Dr. Keller said. My lab will provide a full analysis. If you require an expert witness in court, I am available to testify. Thank you. My voice was just a faint sound. After I ended the call, I looked at Nathan. His face was a mask of shock and pure rage. He murdered your baby. I could only nod, unable to speak. My hands moved to my stomach on their own, protecting a new life, a tiny secret just 6 weeks old. He did not know about this baby. This was one child I was going to save. I am not telling him, I said, feeling a new resolve in my voice. Not about this child, not until he is behind bars. If he learns about it, he will use it to hurt me. He always does. Nathan nodded, his expression showing he understood. Cass, you have to be extremely cautious, he said. If he gives you anything like vitamins or food, do not accept it. I will not eat a thing he makes. I will only drink something I pour myself. I stood up and put the pill bottle in my pocket. I am going to that bank, and I am going to see him lose every single thing he has. When the police cuff him, I will finally tell him I am pregnant. He needs to feel the total loss of everything he has destroyed. A cheerful voice called from downstairs, unaware of the plan. Cass, it is almost 10 o'clock. Alexander wanted to know if I was ready to leave. I looked at Nathan and he gave my shoulder a supportive squeeze. His eyes told me that I was strong enough to do this. I nodded, stood up, and walked toward my future. I was going to face the man who shattered my world, and I was about to destroy his. I would protect this child. The 12-minute car ride was silent. The city traffic and Alexander's phone were the only sounds. My wedding ring glittered in the fall sunlight. I wore a navy suit because I wanted to look strong and confident. I could feel his satisfied gaze from the driver's seat. He thought I was playing the role of the devoted wife. He did not know I was leading him to his own ruin. The Boston Private Bank filled the ground floor of a glass building on Federal Street. It was a world of polished marble and quiet voices, a place for old money. I had visited my advisor here many times about my investments, but this time felt different. The guard, the front desk clerk, and the security cameras all seemed to watch me. The entire building felt tense, and for good reason, because federal agents were already inside. They were pretending to be bank employees and computer repairmen. One could have been the man in the nice suit who just walked by with a briefcase. My husband planned to take all my money. He did not know I was walking him into a trap. My phone buzzed with a message from Diana. We are ready. Just act normal. Follow the plan. Alexander looked at his watch and announced that Vincent was coming. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a man in his early 60s with perfect silver hair. He carried himself like someone who was very familiar with money. His dark suit was obviously custom made. He gave us a fake smile, the kind people use when they want you to trust them. Alexander, it is so good to see you. After they shook hands, he focused on me. You must be Mrs. Pierce, he said. My name is Vincent Hayes, the advisor Alexander told you about. It is a pleasure to meet you. His handshake was firm, but I saw a single drop of sweat on his forehead. His thumb tapped nervously against his briefcase, which showed how anxious he was. Diana's investigation had told me everything. Vincent Hayes was 61. He was a disgraced lawyer from California who knew all about fraud. Alexander promised him 40% of my money. I managed a smile and said the words I had practiced. Thank you for meeting with us on such short notice. Alexander mentioned a small technical problem. That is right, Vincent said without missing a beat. It is just a minor issue with the account documents. This should not take very long to fix. He waved a hand toward the elevator. Shall we go up? The ride to the third floor was completely quiet. I concentrated on staying calm. I knew that my every action was being filmed. The hidden wire taped to my skin felt strange. The meeting room was all glass walls and expensive chairs. The view of the harbor was beautiful, but my heart was pounding. A senior manager named Mr. Chambers was already there for us. He had a stack of papers set perfectly on the table. Mr. and Mrs. Pierce, Mr. Hayes, please sit down. Chambers was in his 50s and had a professional manner that was meant to impress wealthy clients. He had no idea what was really going on. I was the only person in the room who knew the truth. Vincent opened his briefcase and took out a folder, sliding it in front of me. As I explained to Alexander, a system error has frozen the accounts. It is part of a new security update from September. It is a little too effective, but we can sort it out. To fix this, we will need Mrs. Pierce's signature to unlock the accounts and approve the new tax strategy. Chambers reviewed the papers and nodded his head. Everything here seems to be standard. Mrs. Pierce, your signature will release the funds. It will also combine all of your assets into a single trust. The total amount is $68 million. I just need to confirm that you are aware of what this means. I looked straight at him, my voice perfectly calm. I understand completely. My husband handles all of our financial matters. I have complete trust in him. The lie tasted like acid, but I delivered it perfectly. Chambers pushed the papers toward me and I reached for the pen. My hand was surprisingly steady. I wrote my name on all 3 pages, springing the very trap he had prepared for me. Then, doing exactly what Edward told me to do, I added a small note on the final page. It said, signed with the advice of my attorney, Edward Pembroke Esquire, October 28, 2024. Both Vincent and Alexander saw me write it. More importantly, the agents listening in the van would know it was my signal. Excellent, Vincent said, grabbing the papers with obvious relief. Mr. Chambers, let us get this transfer started. Can we finish it today for tax reasons? Chambers looked at his computer screen. I can set it for 2:15. That will give our team enough time to handle the paperwork. Perfect. Alexander took my hand from across the table. Thank you, my dear. I know you dislike all this business. I returned his smile and let him hold my hand, though his touch made me feel sick. Of course, my love. The meeting was over in minutes. Chambers led us to the elevator and said he would send a confirmation. Vincent had another appointment, so Alexander and I were left alone. As the elevator door shut, Alexander pulled me into a hug and kissed my hair. I could not have done this without your help. I could not have either, I whispered. While he looked at his phone, I sent a quick text to Nathan. The trap is ready. 2:15 p.m. His response came back instantly. We are in position. We walked out of the building into the bright afternoon. Alexander called a taxi, still smiling with no clue what was about to happen. He believed that in 3 hours he would be $68 million richer, but in 3 hours he would be in federal custody. In just 3 hours, my long nightmare would finally come to an end. I sat next to him in the cab, watching the city go by, waiting for his life to fall apart. The command van smelled faintly of stale coffee. It was a small, hot space parked on my street made to look like a work truck. Inside, there was enough electronic gear to operate a television station. I sat on a little bench between Nathan and Edward. I could see video of my home office on several screens. Alexander was sitting at the very desk I bought him for our wedding anniversary. He did not know the Federal Bureau of Investigation was watching every single keystroke. Agent Lisa Montgomery turned around from the passenger seat. She was a woman in her 40s with intense eyes and the calm attitude of an expert. She was leading the entire operation. With 1 hour left, she went over the strategy again. At 2:15, Alexander will start 2 separate wire transfers. The first one, for $5.8 million to a company in the Cayman Islands, will look like it was successful. He will even receive a success message and a transaction ID. It will appear totally legitimate, but our team will seize the money. I leaned forward and asked her, how will they do that? The Bank of New York Mellon handles these types of international transfers. That is normal procedure. The money has to go through their computer system first. We have already issued a federal seizure order. The moment that $5.8 million shows up in their system, it will be frozen. The entire process takes just 90 seconds. So his screen will show that he sent almost $6 million, Edward confirmed with a nod, and the second transfer for 62.2 million to a bank in Switzerland. That one is blocked right away, Montgomery explained. No fake success notice, just a big red error message saying transaction failed. That is the point when he will begin to worry. Nathan's hands were clenched into tight balls. Do you think he might try to escape? Montgomery seemed certain. No, I have been studying men like him for 15 years. He is a total narcissist. He will assume it is a minor technical issue he can fix. He always expects you to fix his problems, and he will do the same thing today. He will call Vincent. They will try to figure out another plan. He might even use his charm to get you to sign more documents. He is so convinced he has control over you that he has no idea you are behind this whole thing. A cold sense of satisfaction came over me. So all we do now is wait. We wait, Montgomery agreed. The instant he begins that first transfer, we can arrest him for federal wire fraud. He is looking at 19 charges in 4 different states. He will be in prison for the next 30 years. That last hour seemed to stretch on forever. I stared at the time on the screen as it slowly approached 2:15. My heart pounded harder with each passing second. On the monitor, Alexander walked back and forth in his office, talking on his phone. I held my breath when his gaze passed right over the hidden camera. Nathan whispered, "He does not see it. He has no idea what is happening." At 2:14, Alexander took a seat and opened his laptop computer. Montgomery moved closer to the screens. She spoke softly into a headset to the agents positioned outside. "Get ready. The target is logging into the bank account." I dug my fingernails into my hands. 2:15. His fingers flew across the keyboard and his computer screen appeared on our monitors. The bank's homepage was open. He went straight to the section for wire transfers. I saw his mouse arrow move toward the first transfer, $5,800,000 being sent to Petrov Holdings in Grand Cayman. He clicked on the confirm button. A green message immediately appeared on his screen. Transfer successful. It even gave him a transaction number and said the funds would arrive in 4 to 6 hours. But the message on our screen showed something else entirely. Funds intercepted. A federal seizure order was active. "We got him," Montgomery said quietly. "The first transfer is completely frozen. We have him on camera committing a serious federal crime." Alexander was already starting the second transfer, $62,200,000 to an account in Zurich. He clicked confirm. His screen flashed a bright red warning. The transfer had failed. His account was now completely locked. I watched the blood drain from his face. He stared at the monitor in complete disbelief before his fingers began to fly across the keyboard, desperately trying to remove the block. It was pointless. He snatched his phone, his voice thick with panic. "Vincent, it is frozen, all of it. The Swiss transfer is blocked and I cannot reach the compliance department." He paused. "I have no idea what happened. The first one was successful. I saw it go through, but the second one—" His voice trailed off. "No, Cassandra does not know. She signed all the paperwork this morning. She has no suspicions at all." Through my earpiece, Montgomery's voice was steady. "The bank just confirmed the funds have been seized. The order is complete. We have him recorded on 19 counts of wire fraud. We have identified 4 victims. The tactical team has the green light to go in for the arrest." "Move in." The answer was immediate. "We understand. We are going in 30 seconds." But right before the final order was given, I stood up. "Wait!" Everyone turned to stare at me. Montgomery looked puzzled. "Mr. Morgan? I want 5 minutes alone with him." Nathan grabbed my arm. "Cass, that is a really bad idea. He could hurt you." "He will not. He believes I am still clueless. I want his confession recorded about everything. The other women, the money, and—" I stopped, my hand instinctively going to my stomach. "All of it." Agent Montgomery looked at me for a second. "The wire is live. Anything he says is evidence. But if you think you are in danger, just say the word August. We will rush in right away. Is that understood?" I nodded. "Yes." Edward squeezed my shoulder softly. "You do not need to do this. I have to." I looked directly at him, my voice firm. "He needs to know that I am aware of everything. I have to tell him myself. And then I want to watch his entire world come crashing down." Montgomery spoke into her radio. "Hold your positions. Cassandra Morgan is approaching the target. Wait for my command." I got out of the van into the cold October air. The sun was out, but there was a sharp bite to the wind. I walked the 2 blocks to my own house. My hand was shaking as I put my key in the front door and walked inside. I could hear Alexander's panicked voice coming from his office. I took a single, long, deep breath, pulled my shoulders back, and walked toward the man who had tricked me from the very start. I was ready to confront him with the truth. Before I tell you what went down in that room, I need to know if you are still listening. Type the word justice in the comments right now if you want to find out how this story ends. I have to warn you, the next part of this gets very intense. This is your final chance to turn back. But if you are prepared for what is coming, then let us continue. I stood in the doorway of our home office. I watched the man I thought I loved completely destroy his own life. Alexander was slumped over his desk. His hair was a disaster and his shirt was full of wrinkles. He kept refreshing the bank's website as if that would somehow change the result. He had not heard me come into the house. The silence was thick. The afternoon sun poured through the window, bathing the room in a warm light. For a second, I just watched him. I could feel the small microphone taped to my body. I knew that every single word spoken in this room would become evidence in a federal trial. I thought about the new baby, only 6 weeks along and so very fragile. Then I thought about our first baby, the one Alexander had ended using pills he had created with his own two hands. Then I walked into the office. Alex? He looked up and the relief that spread across his face was so real it was almost comical. Oh, thank God you are home. He started walking toward me, reaching for my hands. There is a problem with the bank. They put a hold on the big transfer. I need you to call Mr. Chambers and give him your authorization. He suddenly stopped speaking. He saw something in my expression that made him freeze. It is over, Alex. My voice seemed to echo in the quiet room. I watched his face shift from confusion to a quick spark of fear, and then to a cold understanding that made his features turn to stone. What are you talking about? He asked with a sharp tone. I took one more step. My heart was pounding, but my voice was level. Daniel Ashford, David Sterling, Marcus Caldwell, Lauren Mitchell, Elizabeth Warren, Jessica Brennan. I let their names linger in the space between us. I know it all. I know about every single lie, every person you destroyed, and every dollar you stole. He just stared at me. Then the disguise of the loving husband disappeared. I finally saw the man he really was. He was not a husband or a partner. He was a complete monster. He let out a quiet, cruel laugh. Lauren tried this. Elizabeth tried this. They went to the police. They hired lawyers. They yelled. Do you have any idea what happened? Absolutely nothing. Because all of you signed the papers, the investment authorization, the marriage license, all of it. It is all completely legal. No actual crime took place. Jessica did not try, I said softly. She took her own life. His laughter died. The silence was heavy. And you killed our baby. His eyes became narrow. Prove it. I took the vitamin bottle out of my pocket. I held it up where he could easily see the green and white pills. I saved this after I lost our child. You told me to get rid of it, but I just could not. 3 days ago, a forensics lab analyzed these pills. 70% of what is inside are prenatal vitamins. The other 30% is pennyroyal oil and black cohosh. Both of them are poisons used to end a pregnancy. You made these pills yourself, Alex. You filled every capsule by hand. You handed them to me each morning for weeks until our baby was gone. His face showed nothing. Then, to my utter horror, he smiled. That baby would have been a problem, he said, his voice strangely calm. You were starting to become suspicious. You were asking too many questions, and you were speaking to your brother again. A baby is a factor I cannot manage. It would have connected you to me for good even after you found out the truth. So I handled it. It was simply a business decision. A wave of ice-cold horror washed over me. Every single word was being recorded. Every cold, planned confession was being captured. I kept my voice steady. And what about this? I put a hand on my stomach. I saw his eyes follow my hand. I am 6 weeks pregnant, Alex. You did this on purpose, did not you? A slow smile formed on his face. In that instant, I truly saw him. He was not just a thief, but a hunter who had chosen me as his target when I was just 17 years old. It is my insurance, he said. He sounded proud, like he was explaining a masterful plan. If you ever tried to leave me, I would have sued for full custody. I would have locked up your inheritance in court for a decade. And if I was ever arrested, a father still has rights. I could have turned your life into a nightmare, even from inside a prison. I would have buried you in legal papers and demanded to see our child. You never would have been free of me as long as a child linked us. My hands were shaking, but my voice remained strong. You are not a father. You are a monster. I am a businessman, he corrected, leaning his back against the desk. He folded his arms with that awful smirk on his face. And you were my single best investment. I planned this for 15 years, watching you, waiting for your parents to die. I positioned myself perfectly. I used Nathan in Singapore, the sailing camp for influence, and the grief group to get close. The romance, our marriage, it was all calculated. My plan was perfect until your brother hired that detective. I told him, it will not save you. You are finished. He laughed, truly amused this time. Really? You think you have the law on your side? Cassandra, you signed every single document, you authorized every transfer. Your name is on every single piece of paper. You do not seem like a victim. You seem like my partner in crime. I am not your partner, I said. I stepped closer, my voice soft and sharp. Because while you were so busy with your plan, I was creating a plan of my own. I have been cooperating with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a federal prosecutor, and 3 other women you hurt. For the past hour, you have been confessing to everything on a live federal wire. Every word has been recorded, every confession has been saved, and in about 30 seconds, a federal team is going to break down that door and take you away. You will face charges for wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and for poisoning our first child. You are going to prison for 35 years, Alex. You will never get near this baby. The color drained from his face. He glanced toward the window, possibly thinking about an escape. Just then, I heard boots on the porch, followed by the loud snap of the door frame giving way. Men were yelling, "Federal agents!" Alexander stared at me, his eyes filled with total shock and rage. "You did this to me!" The office door flew open. 4 agents in full tactical gear poured in. Agent Montgomery was right behind them, her voice calm and clear. "Alexander Petrov, you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. A federal charge under 18 United States Code 1841 is also being filed for the death of an unborn child. You have the right to remain silent." They pulled his arms back, and I heard the handcuffs snap shut. It felt like I was watching a movie. This was the man who stole my baby and stalked me for 15 years. He thought he owned me. And now he was being walked out of my home. His face was a mask of disbelief as his entire world collapsed. As they led him past, he leaned in to whisper, "You can't prove anything about the baby." I looked him right in the eye and gave him a tiny, satisfied smile. I already did. The Boston office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation took up 3 floors in a city building. It was a place with fluorescent lights, old carpets, and the constant buzz of work. I sat in a small conference room on the 4th floor, a cup of bad coffee getting cold beside me. Through a one-way mirror, we watched them process Alexander Petrov. He looked so small without his fancy jacket, his cuffed hands being covered in ink for fingerprinting. Vincent Hayes was in another room. His perfect silver hair was a mess and his face was pale and sweaty. Neither of them spoke a word. They refused to even look at each other. Their partnership, one that had stolen millions and destroyed lives, was now completely falling apart. Nathan stood next to me, his hand resting reassuringly on my shoulder. Our lawyer, Edward, stood by the door with his briefcase, already thinking about what to do next. Agent Montgomery walked in carrying a laptop and an evidence bag. "Miss Morgan, I will need the vitamin bottle." I pulled it from my jacket pocket and gave it to her. She officially logged it as evidence in case number 24CR10847 against Petrov. It was marked as item 14A, a bottle of prenatal vitamins with clear signs of tampering. She handed it to a forensics specialist who was waiting outside. "Our lab can verify Dr. Keller's report in 48 hours, she said, taking a seat. "But his report and the taped confession are more than enough. We can charge Petrov for giving you a toxic substance under Federal Code 18 United States Code Section 1841, the Unborn Victims of Violence Act. This charge is a completely separate felony. It could add up to 20 years to his prison sentence. I could only manage a small nod, a lump forming in my throat that made it impossible to speak. Montgomery turned her laptop toward me so I could see the screen. "I need you to listen to this. I need you to confirm that it is clear, that it is powerful, and that he has no way out." She hit the play button, and Alexander's voice filled the room, sounding as calm as it did in my house just a short time ago. "The baby would have created problems, so I handled it. It was just a business decision." I shut my eyes, forcing myself to hear every single word. "It also worked as a form of insurance. If you had ever thought about leaving, I would have tied you up in a terrible custody battle. I would have frozen all your money for years. I could have made your life a nightmare even if I was in prison." Montgomery paused the recording. Every word is time-stamped, authenticated, and backed up on 3 different servers. His lawyers will try to get it thrown out, but they will fail. You were in your own house. He was not under arrest, and we had a federal warrant for the recording. This evidence is perfect and will hold up in court. "What happened to the money?" Edward asked. The $5.8 million he tried to send to the Cayman Islands. Montgomery showed us another screen with a transfer log from a New York bank. The money never made it out of New York. The moment the transfer started, our seizure order kicked in and the money was frozen. On his screen, Petrov saw a success notice, a confirmation, and an arrival time. But the reality is, federal agents already had control of it. It is a standard procedure we use to stop international wire fraud. He broke the law the instant he pressed confirm. Every single thing he did after that just created more evidence against him. She then displayed a pharmacy receipt from a CVS in Boston dated August 7th. We also looked at his prescription history. Your doctor wrote you a prescription for birth control in July. Petrov picked up that refill for you in August using your insurance, but your medical charts prove you never actually got the medication. He deliberately kept you from taking your birth control so that you would get pregnant. This is called reproductive coercion. It is incredibly difficult to prove most of the time, but because we have his confession on tape, it is a guaranteed win for us in court. I stared at the pharmacy receipt and saw Alexander's signature on the line. A cold rage started to build deep inside me. Every move he made was part of a plan. Every kind word he ever said was a lie. Even the baby I had carried was just another pawn in his twisted game. What are the exact charges he is facing? Nathan asked. Montgomery brought up a formal charging document. It was a 20-page file filled with legal language that outlined their entire case. There are 27 counts of wire fraud under 18 United States Code Section 1343. Each illegal transfer that crossed state or international borders is a separate crime. We have found transfers to shell companies in the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, Panama, and Switzerland. We have also found domestic transfers that were used to fund his illegal business. There are 8 counts of identity theft under Section 1028. He used 4 different fake names over a 5-year period, creating false documents and fake businesses. There is 1 count of a RICO conspiracy under Section 1962. He and Vincent Hayes ran a criminal enterprise with a long pattern of illegal activity. We also have 1 charge under the Unborn Victims of Violence Act for his actions and 1 charge of bigamy. Bigamy? I looked at her, completely shocked. He is married to somebody else? Montgomery's expression did not change. We are still confirming the last few details, but Interpol found a marriage license from Prague. A woman named Elena Petro married Alexander Petro in 2012. They have 2 children. She has been trying to divorce him for 6 years, but he has ignored all the legal notices. Under both Czech and American law, their marriage is still legal. That means any marriage after that one, including yours, is invalid. The room started to spin. I placed my hand on the table to steady myself. He has kids, 2 of them. A boy who is 10 and a girl who is 8. Elena is a schoolteacher in Prague. The last time she heard from him was in 2018. He simply walked out on them. Nathan swore under his breath. Edward's face became like a mask of stone. I felt something break inside of me. It was worse than sadness. It was a horrifying new reality. I was not the only woman whose world Alexander had built just to tear it down. I was not his second victim or his third. There was another wife and 2 kids on the other side of the planet. For 6 years, they had been waiting for a husband and father who was never coming back. What will happen to Vincent? Edward asked in a low voice. Montgomery looked toward the booking room where Vincent was slumped in a chair as his lawyer spoke to him. We gave him an offer. If he cooperates completely and testifies against Petrov, he will get 15 years with a chance for parole in 10. He will also have to pay back $2 million. If he says no, he could face 30 years or more. His lawyer is a smart man. He will advise him to take the deal. Right at that moment, as if on cue, Vincent's lawyer stood up, walked to the observation window, and gave Agent Montgomery a short, decisive nod. She nodded in return. He took the deal, Montgomery confirmed. That gives us a cooperating witness. He can testify about 47 fake documents, 12 foreign bank accounts, and the entire 6-year criminal enterprise with Petrov. He will explain how they split the money, their planning sessions, how they chose their victims, and he has already admitted to getting the poison that Petrov gave you. My head felt foggy. I thought about the 10 weeks that I had carried my first child. I remembered the joy, the fear, and the love for a life that Alexander chose to end. I thought about the new baby now growing inside me, just 6 weeks along, unaware of the fight for its own existence. How long will he be in prison? I asked. For Alexander, how many years will he actually serve? Montgomery looked at me directly. If he is convicted on only half of these charges, he is facing a minimum of 35 years. There will be no parole. He will die in prison. I slowly nodded my head. It did not feel like it was enough. It could never truly be enough. but it was a start. Montgomery shut her laptop and stood up. There is one last thing you should know. His legal wife's name is Elena Petrov, and she is in Prague. At this very moment, Interpol is contacting her. They will have to tell her about the arrest, the criminal charges, and the fact that her husband had another wife. If she chose to speak, her testimony would change everything. A jury hearing about an abandoned wife and her children would be powerful. Describing his money schemes would erase all sympathy for him. Nathan asked, "Do you believe she will cooperate with us?" Montgomery replied honestly, "I am not certain, but in her position, I would want to watch him face justice." 3 days later, I sat in the Boston FBI conference room, staring at an empty screen. The building was unusually silent on that cold Wednesday. Agent Montgomery was on a call with Interpol. Nathan sat next to me, his legs shaking with nerves. Suddenly, a woman's face filled the monitor. She looked younger than I expected, with dark hair and tired eyes. An interpreter sat with her in a stark white room. This was Elena Petrov, Alexander's real wife, who was 39 years old. Montgomery started softly. "Thank you for talking with us. I know this is hard for you." Elena just nodded, her hands held together tightly. She spoke English well, but with an accent. "I want to assist. If he hurt others, I need to help stop him." Montgomery pointed toward me. "This is Cassandra Morgan. She married Alexander in 2023. Elena looked at me, and her face became gentler. She was not angry, just filled with a profound sadness. "I am aware," she said softly. "Interpol told me everything. I am truly sorry. It was hard for me to speak. I never knew you or your children existed." Elena spoke with a kind voice. "He was careful so nobody would find out. That is how he operates. He makes each woman feel like she is his entire world." Montgomery opened a folder. "Can you describe your marriage from the beginning to when he disappeared?" Elena took a deep, unsteady breath to steady herself. "Our first meeting was in 2010. I taught English in Prague. He told me he worked for a shipping company. His charm was overwhelming and I felt unique. We got married in 2012. I was expecting our son David. He insisted it was the right thing." Her voice began to tremble. "David arrived in 2014. Sophia followed in 2016. Alexander had to travel often for work to cities like London, Singapore, and New York. He would leave for weeks but returned with presents and exciting tales. I truly thought we were creating a future together." Montgomery asked, "What was the date he left?" "It was in July of 2018. He said he was going to Boston for a 3-month project. He kissed the children goodbye. He promised he would phone us each week without fail." Elena's expression grew firm. "I never got a single call. His phone number stopped working. I attempted to divorce him in 2019, but the court could not locate him. He had vanished without a trace." My own eyes started to sting with tears. "So you have been raising them by yourself all this time?" "I have 2 jobs now, one as a teacher and another as a tutor. My parents give me a lot of help with David and Sophia. We are getting by." Elena's voice grew more confident. "But for 6 years, my son has asked when his father will return." Montgomery moved in closer. "Miss Petrov, there is something you should know. Alexander did more than leave you. From 2019 until now, he tricked 4 other American women. There was Lauren Mitchell in San Francisco. As Daniel Ashford, he stole $4.2 million. In Seattle, Jessica Brennan knew him as David Sterling and lost $2.8 million. 6 months after he disappeared, she took her own life. Elizabeth Warren of Austin lost $3.1 million to him as Marcus Caldwell. And then there is Cassandra. Elena stared at the monitor, her face went white. "Jessica killed herself." "Yes," Montgomery said softly. "It was in March of 2021. She kept a journal." Elena's hands tightened into fists. "He did all those things while I raised his children, worked 2 separate jobs, and listened to David cry for him." "I had to say something. I am so very sorry. I never knew about you." "What if you had known?" Elena asked, without any anger in her voice. "He deceived every one of us. You are his victim, the same as me." Montgomery spoke with care. "Miss Petrov, we need your testimony in court. Your marriage license and the children's birth certificates prove he committed bigamy. That makes his other marriages illegal. Your testimony shows this is not just about money. It shows a habit of ruining families." Elena looked right at me and nodded with determination. "I will testify. I will do it for Jessica, for you, and for my children. They must learn their father is not a good person who just disappeared. He is a lawbreaker who abandoned them intentionally." Later that day, the federal charges were changed to include 1 charge of bigamy. My 2023 marriage to Alexander was now a federal crime because he was married to Elena. That evening, Montgomery left me alone but kept the video link on. Elena was still on screen. "Cassandra," Elena said softly, "are you okay?" I automatically placed a hand on my stomach. I am pregnant. I am about 6 weeks along. He did this on purpose to use against me. Elena's face showed pure horror. Oh no, I am so very sorry. You are not to blame, but that baby is his child, just like David and Sophia. This means you will be tied to him for the rest of your life. I nodded while tears ran down my face. I am not sure I have the strength for this. You do, Elena said with certainty. You will find the strength because you are far stronger than he is. And that baby needs a mother to protect them, just as I protected David and Sophia. For a moment, we were silent, two women worlds apart, connected by one man's lies. He was never a true father, Elena finally said. Not to my children and not to yours. He was like a ghost in our lives. Now that ghost is going to prison, where he belongs. I brushed the tears from my face. Thank you for agreeing to testify. Together, we will ensure he pays for this, Elena vowed, her voice firm. For Jessica, for all of us. The trial date was set for November 18th. The prosecutor now had Jessica Brennan's diary. An email appeared on a Tuesday, roughly 2 weeks after they arrested Alexander. The subject was direct and cold, reading only about Jessica Brennan. I was sitting at my desk at Morgan Maritime. I tried to get lost in work reports and shipping documents. I just wanted to forget about that hidden recording, the vitamin container, and Alexander's expression as the FBI cuffed him. I clicked open the message. Miss Morgan, my name is Amy Brennan. Jessica was my older sister. I read the news about Alexander Petrov's arrest. We need to speak. My hands trembled as I called the number she provided. A woman answered after 2 rings. Her voice was low and cautious, as if she trusted no one. Miss Morgan? Yes, this is Amy. I am deeply sorry about your sister. There was a long silence. Finally, she said, Thank you, but apologies will not bring her back. I need to know if you will make him suffer for what he did to her. I will, I assured her. The trial is set for November 18th. I am going to testify. 2 other victims will be there, plus his actual wife from Prague. His wife. Amy's laugh was bitter and sharp. Naturally, there was a wife. Jessica truly believed she was special to him. She thought David Sterling was her new chance for happiness after her first husband passed away. She had no idea she was another name on his long list of victims. I closed my eyes tightly. I did not know about Jessica until recently. There was nothing you could have done to stop it. None of us could. By the time I realized something was off, it was already over. Amy's voice began to shake. She wrote in a diary. I discovered it in her apartment after she died. No one else has seen it. But if you are serious about this, I want the prosecutor to get it. The jury must understand precisely what he did to her. Could you send it to my office? I will mail it overnight. But Cassandra, before you read it, please know this. My sister was not weak. She was a grieving widow, and he preyed on her vulnerability. They met in a support group for grieving people. He knew just what to say. When she finally understood his true nature, it was too late. The box came the next morning. Inside was a small leather journal, neatly wrapped in paper. Alone in my office, I opened it with trembling hands. The first page was from August of 2020. Her writing was tidy and full of hope. I met a new man today named David. He lost his wife to cancer 2 years ago. We talked for 3 straight hours. He gets the loneliness, the anger, and the emptiness of grief. It has been a long time since someone truly understood me like this. October 2020. We are married. It happened quickly, I know. But after losing so much, you learn to cherish every moment. I have never been this happy. December 2020. David feels my friends do not get our bond. I think he is right. They always ask if I am certain about him or if I have thought it through. Nobody knew how broken I was until he came into my life. Inside a journal from February of 2021, her trembling script told a story of absolute fear. All the money is gone, every single penny has vanished. The bank records show every dollar was wired away. David is not answering his phone. I feel like my chest is collapsing, like my mind is shutting down. What will I do now? Her last entry was on March 15th. The ink was blurred as if tears had fallen on the page. He stole my savings, my home, and my will to live. The police called it a private dispute. My attorney said you cannot sue a man named David Sterling who does not exist. I am now in debt for $50,000 and my car is next. I can still picture his face, hear him say he loved me on that last morning. If you are holding this journal, I am begging you, make him pay. Please stop him from destroying another person's life. I cannot continue this way. I am so sorry. I shut the journal and finally let myself weep. My tears were for Jessica, a woman who sought love but found a predator. They were for Elena, raising 2 children on her own. I cried for Lauren and Elizabeth, both left with shattered lives. And I cried for me, pregnant with a child he planned to use against me. I phoned Amy that night to tell her I had finished the journal. Her voice was strained as if she was preparing for bad news. I am going to read from this in court. I will make certain that the jury hears every last word. I give you my word, Amy. Jessica's life will have meaning. Thank you. Amy's voice finally broke, filled with emotion. He was so unbelievably cruel to her. He was, I said, to every one of us. The following day, I went to the United States Attorney's Office to see James Sullivan, the prosecutor. He was in his early 50s, with silver streaks at his temples. He had the sharp, focused eyes of a man who put people like Alexander behind bars for a living. He read the entire journal without saying a word, his jaw getting tighter with every page he turned. This is incredibly powerful, he said when he was done. We usually get impact statements from family members, but this is Jessica speaking for herself. It is like she is testifying from beyond the grave. If the judge permits it, I will read her final entry in my closing argument. Sullivan was adamant that if he could not read it, I must. He told me I was a victim and I had a right to speak. That jury needed to understand what Alexander Petrov did to Jessica Brennan. The trial was scheduled in only 2 days. The case of the United States versus Alexander Petrov would begin on November 18, 2024. The case number was 24C10847. We were armed with 42 federal counts, 4 victims prepared to testify, and a diary from a woman who had been silenced. I gazed out my office window toward Boston Harbor, imagining Jessica in her Seattle apartment all alone, writing those last sentences. I thought about the secret I was keeping, the 6-week-old life forming inside of me. Someday I would need to explain to this child who his father really was. All that mattered now was making sure Alexander Petrov would never harm anyone else. The trial was now less than a week away. On that Monday, November 18th, I found myself standing on the steps of the courthouse. News trucks were parked along the road as reporters shouted questions that disappeared into the city's roar. Nathan gently touched my elbow and asked if I was prepared. I gave a slight nod, even though my stomach felt like it was tied in a painful knot. We made our way through the security line. The marshals searched my handbag, took away Nathan's small knife, and sent us toward the courtroom on the 6th floor. The corridor smelled of fresh floor wax and old, well-kept wood. Every bench was occupied by unfamiliar faces. I recognized some of the other victims with their relatives, along with journalists and people just there to watch. Promptly at 9 o'clock, a marshal swung the doors open. The courtroom was more intimate than I had expected. Rows of dark wooden benches stretched for about 30 feet, facing a jury box with 12 vacant chairs. In the front, Judge Patricia Whitmore's elevated bench stood tall, with an American flag posted beside it. Alexander was at the defense table dressed in an orange jumpsuit, his hands in chains. His attorney, Margaret Thornhill, was seated right beside him. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair tied back in a tight bun and was wearing a navy blue suit. She had the composed expression of someone who had defended rich and powerful monsters for 25 years without ever seeming stressed. James Sullivan, our prosecutor, was at the adjacent table, straightening his documents. At 46 years old, with a receding hairline and glasses, he was famous for taking down financial criminals with careful precision. Judge Whitmore made her entrance at 9:15. Everyone in the room stood up. The judge, a 58-year-old woman in a simple gray robe, had been on the federal bench for 22 years. Her voice was sharp and clear. "You may all be seated." She officially began the proceedings for the United States versus Alexander Petrov. She then turned her attention to the prosecutor. "Mr. Sullivan, you can now begin." Sullivan rose, fastened his jacket button, and walked toward the jury with no papers in his hand. He started by stating that this case was about more than just a broken heart. He described it as a 15-year hunt, and Alexander Petrov was the predator. Sullivan detailed how his victims were not found in dark city alleys. He tracked them down using databases, alumni groups, and even support groups for the grieving. He specifically looked for women who were alone and emotionally vulnerable after a terrible loss. He would invent new identities, complete with fake names and altered appearances. Getting married was always his next step. Once they were married, he would cut his new wife off from her family and friends. Then, he would use fake paperwork to empty her bank accounts and ruin her credit before he simply disappeared. He did this to 4 different women in a span of just 5 years. One of those women was pushed to take her own life. The other 3 lost absolutely everything. Cassandra Morgan, seated in the first row, was the woman who finally stopped him. Sullivan assured the jury that they would hear directly from the women he had harmed. He told them they would see the bank statements, the fake corporations, and the substance he used to terminate a pregnancy. He promised they would listen to a confession from Alexander himself. When they had seen all the proof, Sullivan declared they would put him away for good. Then Thornhill stood and gave the jury a calm smile. She said the prosecution's goal was to make her client look like a terrible person. She argued that he was just a businessman involved in several failed marriages. She declared that these women made their own choices throughout the relationships. They knowingly put their signatures on every single legal form, which included prenuptial agreements and business papers. She explained that financial circumstances can shift and sometimes relationships simply fail. This was not a criminal act, she said to them. It was just a part of life. She advised the jurors not to be influenced by emotional stories, stating that every transaction was perfectly legal. She insisted they should examine the evidence, not their emotions. My hands clenched into tight fists. Nathan leaned over to me and whispered that she was very good, but that Sullivan was much better. The first day of the trial was all about Lauren Mitchell, a 44-year-old software engineer from San Francisco who had gray streaks in her hair. She went to the witness stand at 2 in the afternoon. Her voice was firm yet filled with anger. She described meeting a man named Daniel Ashford in a support group for people who had lost their spouses. Her own husband had passed away just 6 months before. Daniel told her his wife died from cancer, and he appeared to know exactly what she was going through. They got married just 8 months after that. He talked her into granting him legal control over her deceased husband's estate. Just 2 weeks after she signed the documents, her bank accounts were all drained. $4.2 million had vanished. The police told her that it was a civil matter, not a crime. By the time she was able to hire an attorney, Daniel was long gone. She was left with absolutely nothing. She lost her home, her money, and her ability to ever trust anyone again. The following day was all about Elizabeth Warren. She was a 48-year-old restaurant owner from Austin, and she met a man named Marcus Caldwell at a food conference. He introduced himself as a successful investor and completely charmed her. He suggested they become business partners, and then he conned her into signing away her whole company. Not long after that, $3.1 million disappeared from her business accounts. She stated in court that she paid $80,000 to lawyers who were unable to bring her justice. The third day was the most difficult of all. Jessica's younger sister, Amy Brennan, sat on the witness stand. At 37 years old, she held a leather journal in her hands. Her eyes were puffy and red, and she was clearly shaking. Mr. Sullivan asked her to read the final passage, dated March 15, 2021. Amy's voice wavered as she spoke the words. He has taken everything from me. My savings, my home, my reason to live. If you are reading this, please make him stop. I cannot keep going. A thick, heavy quiet filled the room. Several jurors looked down and away. A woman sitting in the front row started to cry softly. Amy then stared right at Alexander and said he was the cause of her sister's death. Thornhill immediately jumped to her feet, yelling her objection, and the judge agreed. However, the damage had been done. The fourth day was my turn to testify. On that Thursday morning, I walked to the witness box and was sworn in. Mr. Sullivan took me back to October of 2023. I talked about the vitamins, how they made my skin turn a sickly yellow, and the frantic trip to the hospital. I told the court that I had miscarried my baby at just 10 weeks. I motioned toward the bottle on the evidence table. Lab analysis had confirmed it was full of oils used to cause a miscarriage. I looked straight into the eyes of the jury and said, "He took my baby's life." In that exact moment, Sullivan hit play on a recording. The sound of Alexander's detached voice filled the silent courtroom. He was talking about getting rid of it. He referred to my pregnancy as a smart business decision and the next baby as a form of insurance. I saw 3 of the jurors turn white as if they were about to be physically ill. Alexander's expression was an unreadable wall, giving nothing away. Mr. Sullivan finished his points at 3 o'clock. He told the jury that the next day an undercover agent from the Federal Bureau of Investigation would testify. He brought up a summer camp picture from 2009, claiming it would unlock the entire 15-year deception. I walked out of the courthouse as the November sun began to sink. Nathan wanted to know if I was okay. I was not able to form a single word in response. I just had a strong feeling that the complete truth was about to come out. On Friday, the 22nd of November, I went back to the courthouse under a heavy gray sky. The chamber was more crowded than I had ever witnessed. Reporters were packed together along the back wall. Courtroom sketch artists were drawing rapidly on their pads, and law students occupied an entire row. Nathan offered me coffee, but I could not register the taste. The judge's gavel fell at exactly 9. "Mr. Sullivan, you can call your witness." Mr. Sullivan stood and said, "The United States calls Dr. Margaret Ellis." A woman who looked to be in her mid-40s with reddish-brown hair and calm gray eyes approached the stand. After taking the oath, she sat down. When Mr. Sullivan inquired about her job, she stated she was a supervisory special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She let the court know she had been undercover for the last 18 months using the identity of Diana Hartwell. A soft wave of surprise went through the room. My own heart started to beat heavily in my chest. Nathan leaned close to whisper that she was the person who had come to my aid. Agent Ellis testified that in March of 2023, she had pretended to be a new widow who had recently inherited $12 million. She attended the very same grief support meeting that Mr. Petrov used to find his victims. He reached out to her in less than 2 weeks. For the next year and a half, she recorded every move he made. This proof included 43 conversations that were secretly taped. While she never signed her name to any documents, she observed him as he prepared to take her entire fake fortune. Mr. Sullivan then grabbed a laptop from the evidence table and questioned Agent Ellis about Mr. Petrov's secret hard drive. She confirmed that she found a spreadsheet he had named Portfolio. The document held a list of 23 separate names. Next to each name was a guess of their inheritance, notes about their family's weak spots, and the best time to act. He had started creating this document back in 2009. Mr. Sullivan then showed the spreadsheet on a large screen for the whole court to view. I felt like I could not get a breath. My own initials were right there on line 17. The document estimated that my inheritance was somewhere between $50 and $70 million. It made a note that my parents were getting older and that my brother was living in another state. The plan was to befriend me after I got my inheritance, sometime between my 28th and 32nd birthdays. Agent Ellis continued to speak in a calm and sure voice. She clarified that Mr. Petrov had not stalked me for 15 years. He had chosen me as a target. During the summer of 2009, he took a summer position at a sailing camp in Maine. He was 26 years old at the time and introduced himself to everyone as an investment consultant. That was the first place he met me, a 17-year-old girl, and my family. He very carefully gathered information on all of us. He discovered that my father was the chief executive officer of a major company and that my mother had her own private trust fund. He was even aware of my brother's adoption. He put my name on his list and then simply bided his time. He kept track of me from afar with news updates and public records. After my parents died in 2022 and I got my inheritance, he set his plan in motion. Ellis said this was not stalking but was instead methodical criminal planning. Thornhill objected, calling it her personal opinion. Judge Whitmore said into her microphone, "The objection is overruled. This witness is giving expert testimony. Please go on, Agent Ellis." Ellis then looked directly at the jury. "We found that he had similar schemes for Lauren Mitchell, Jessica Brennan, and Elizabeth Warren. He studied every woman on that list for years before he ever got in touch. He would patiently wait for their fathers or husbands to pass on. Only at that point would he make his move." On Monday, November 25th, the prosecution called Elena Petro to the stand. Her face was visible on a large screen broadcasting live from Prague. The woman in her late 30s seemed totally exhausted, with dark hair framing her worn-out face. Behind her, you could see two small children in the room. An interpreter sat near the camera. Mr. Sullivan started by asking Eleanor about her marriage. She answered in her Czech language and the interpreter translated for the court. "We were married in 2012. I was a teacher, and he said he was in business. We had two sons, David in 2014 and Sophia in 2016. In July of 2018, he said he was going on a business trip to America, and then he just never came back. I tried to file for a divorce, but he would not sign the legal papers. By Czech law, I am still officially his wife." Mr. Sullivan submitted their marriage license and the children's birth certificates as evidence. From her table, Thornhill, the defense attorney, raised doubts about the documents, but a legal official in Prague had already verified them. The jury members looked deeply concerned. On Tuesday, November 26th, Mr. Sullivan had 3 more witnesses take the stand. Every single one described how Alexander had cut me off from my friends and family. Sarah Collins, my roommate from college and my best friend for 10 years, spoke first. "I attempted to call her in the spring of 2024, but my calls always went to voicemail. I sent an email and the reply I got said she was on a trip with her husband and wanted to be left alone." The way the email was written did not sound like her in any way. I learned later that Alexander had gotten into her email and had sent those replies himself. Dr. Raon Torres, my family physician, testified after her. "I called her office in August of 2024 about my recent test results. Her husband was the one who answered the phone. He informed me that she had found another doctor. I did not hear from her again after we spoke. Maria Delgado, my neighbor, was the last to give her account. I had asked her to come to our block party that September. She said no in a text message that was unusually cold and formal, not like the Cassandra I was familiar with. I understand now that the text was not from her. The phone logs laid out the entire picture. There were 17 blocked calls from Nathan, 12 from Sarah, and 8 from Dr. Torres. Alexander had systematically destroyed my entire support system. At 2 in the afternoon, Vincent Hayes walked with a shaky gait to the witness stand. He was wearing a gray suit that was much too big for his body and his hands were shaking. He took great care to not look in Alexander's direction. Mr. Sullivan told him to tell the court his occupation. Vincent's voice was quiet and hoarse. I produced 47 counterfeit documents between 2019 and 2024. These forgeries included things like power of attorney, business agreements, and prenuptial contracts. I set up 12 secret bank accounts in 6 separate countries. The countries were the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, Panama, Switzerland, Singapore, and the United Arab Emirates. Alexander and I split the proceeds. I received 40% and he received 60%. In the end, we stole $23.4 million, not the $14 million that was first reported. There were 5 other women who were too ashamed to ever speak up. Mr. Sullivan then handed him a receipt from a store. Did you buy pennyroyal oil and black cohosh extract in October of 2023? Vincent was only able to nod. Yes, Alexander told me to get them for him. He said that the herbs were for a private health matter. I did not push him for details. On Wednesday, the 27th of November, Sullivan played the body camera footage of Alexander's arrest. The jury watched me confront my husband at our home. They listened to his horrible confession about my miscarriage, which he called an insurance plan. Then they observed as federal agents placed him in handcuffs. Several jurors had to avert their eyes from the monitor. One woman let out a gasp, her hand shooting up to her mouth. At 3 in the afternoon, the judge concluded the court session. The final statements were set for the next morning. After that, the jury would reach a verdict. I was in the hall feeling completely spent. Nathan asked if I was all right. I told him I was, but my head was spinning. The next day, 12 strangers would decide if justice would be served or if Alexander's charm would deceive everyone for the last time. On Wednesday morning, the 27th of November, I sat in my chair in the court's front row. I held onto my purse so tightly that my knuckles had turned completely white. He emptied every single one of her bank accounts, and when he learned that she was pregnant, he fed her toxic oils and herbs. He did this to make her lose the baby. A child would have made stealing her money much harder. A year later, he got her pregnant again on purpose to use as insurance. You all heard him say that on the recording. I got rid of it. The next one is for insurance. He ended the life of his own unborn baby just to maintain his power. He walked out on a wife and 2 small children in Prague. He pushed Jessica Brennan to the very brink until she took her own life. That is 4 women, and one of them is gone forever. This is not just about money, this is a long-term criminal operation. He went to the evidence table and lifted up Jessica's diary. He opened it to the last page and began to read her final words out loud. He has taken everything, my money, my home, my desire to live. If you are reading this, I am begging you to make him stop. Please do not let him hurt anyone else. I cannot go on like this. I am so sorry. His voice trembled as he read. 2 of the jurors were openly crying. Sullivan closed the diary and gently placed it back on the table. Jessica wrote those words only 6 hours before she died. She was pleading for someone to stop him. Now, you have the ability to find him guilty. You can send him to prison. You can make sure he never gets the chance to destroy another life. He walked back to his seat. A heavy silence settled over the courtroom. Thornhill stood up, smoothed her skirt, and looked at the jury. Her voice was steady and calm, as if she were discussing the forecast. The prosecution tells a tale of a master criminal, but what we really have here is a series of messy divorces and failed business deals. These women signed legal documents with their own hands. They agreed to give power of attorney, to sign prenuptial agreements, and to many other business contracts. They chose to be in these relationships. Money was exchanged, marriages fell apart. These things happen every single day all across our country. That is not a crime. The government is trying to turn a civil matter into a criminal case because the FBI needs a big victory. You cannot let your feelings get in the way of the facts. The responsibility to prove guilt belongs to them. If there is any reasonable doubt, and I believe there is, you must find him not guilty. She then returned to her chair. Judge Whitmore gave her last instructions to the jury. She explained the ideas of reasonable doubt, the duty of the prosecution, and the 42 charges they had to consider. The jury left the room at 10:30. I waited with Nathan and the other women in a nearby conference room. Lauren paced from one side of the room to the other. Elizabeth sat perfectly still and stared at the wall. Amy clutched a picture of Jessica. Elena appeared on a video call from Prague with her sleeping children behind her. Agent Montgomery brought us coffee, but no one took a sip. At noon, an officer came to the door. He said there was still no verdict. It could take hours or maybe even days. He came back at 2:30. The jury has returned. My heart started pounding in my chest. We went back to our seats in the courtroom. Alexander was sitting at his table with no expression on his face. Judge Whitmore sat down. Has the jury reached a verdict? The head juror, a woman in a grey sweater, stood. Yes, Your Honor, on all 42 charges. Yes, Your Honor. And what is your verdict? Guilty on all counts. The courtroom suddenly filled with noise. Reporters rushed for the doors. Lauren started sobbing without stopping. Elizabeth put her face in her hands. Amy whispered softly, "Thank you, Jessica." Nathan gave my hand a tight squeeze. I felt like all the breath had been knocked out of me. Judge Whitmore slammed her gavel. Order! Sentencing will be on Tuesday, December 2nd at 10 o'clock in the morning. Mr. Petrov, you are remanded into custody. Alexander's face was a complete blank as two officers put him in handcuffs and led him out. He never looked back. 4 days later, I returned to court for the sentencing. Judge Whitmore was reading from a prepared statement. Mr. Petrov, you have been found guilty of giving a toxic substance that caused the death of an unborn child. The recording played in this court proves you intentionally ended Miss Morgan's first pregnancy to control her. It also proves you intentionally started her second pregnancy to use as a bargaining chip. Federal law and this court are here to protect children. The evidence shows you are a threat to the safety of any child. On top of that, you abandoned your two children in Prague for 6 years, giving them no money or support. Your parental rights to Miss Morgan's unborn child are now permanently terminated. This decision also terminates any future rights to David and Sophia Petrov. You are forbidden from having any contact, direct or indirect, with any of these children. She then looked up from her papers. I sentence you to 35 years in federal prison with no chance of parole. You will also repay $14 million to your victims and pay a fine of $500,000. I am also granting permanent restraining orders for Cassandra Morgan, Elena Petrov, Lauren Mitchell, Elizabeth Warren, and Amy Brennan. You are not allowed to contact them ever again. Then she addressed Vincent Hayes. Mr. Hayes, your help has been considered. 15 years in federal prison and $2 million in restitution. Take them away. Marshals led both men out of the room. Alexander looked like he was in a total daze. Vincent's entire body was shaking. After it was all over, Lauren, Elizabeth, Amy, and I stood outside in the cold December air. Eleanor was on a video call, and Nathan held the phone so we could all see her smiling face through her tears. We did not need to say anything. Agent Montgomery walked over to us. You all saved lives today. You have saved women he had not even met yet, women who will now never have to know his name. I could only nod. For the first time in 18 long months, I felt a huge weight lift off of me. 1 year later, in November of 2025, I was in my home office. My laptop was open as I looked over grant proposals for the Morgan Foundation. It is a charity I started to help people who have been victims of fraud. We help them with the legal system, pay for private investigators, and push for stronger laws to keep them safe. In our first year, we helped 247 women and got back $8.4 million. Nathan manages all of our technology. Lauren is on our board of directors. Elizabeth hosts fundraisers in her dining room. Amy is our director of victim support. My phone started to buzz. I did not recognize the number. I almost ignored it. But something made me answer the call. A woman's trembling voice was on the line. Is this Cassandra Morgan? I saw your foundation's website. I think I might need your help. His name is Richard Caldwell. We have only been married for 6 months, but I found a strange spreadsheet on his computer. I closed my eyes for just a second, and then I opened them. Tell me everything. It was November in the year 2025. I was looking out the big window of our Boston office. I was gently bouncing my 6-month-old daughter on my shoulder. My baby Elena was making soft little sounds. Her tiny fingers were wrapped tightly around a lock of my hair. I provided the name of the woman Alexander Petrov left behind in Prague. Down below, sunlight danced on the harbor as a Morgan maritime ship neared the dock. It had the same deep blue paint my father chose 40 years ago. His legacy was moving forward. So was I. Behind me, the office was filled with focused energy. Lauren Mitchell wore a headset, guiding someone through freezing a joint account. Elizabeth Warren was reviewing a file on asset recovery. A former restaurant owner, she now traced money through 19 states. In the back, Nathan built a new, powerful database. This system connected criminals to their fake names, shell corporations, and hidden bank accounts. In Washington, D.C., Diana Blackwood trained Federal Bureau of Investigation agents on the methods of romance scammers. Our top attorney, Edward Pembroke, worked for free. Within only 10 months, the Morgan Foundation handled 247 cases. We recovered $8.4 million, and our legal support led to 3 additional arrests. With the rest of my inheritance, I created something my parents would be proud of. We ran it like a family, dedicated to helping people instead of making money. The foundation's special hotline started ringing. Lauren looked over at me. You want to get that? I shook my head, adjusted Elena on my hip, and picked up the phone. Morgan Foundation, Cassandra speaking. The voice on the line was a woman's, delicate and frightened. My name is Grace Sullivan, and I am calling from Phoenix. She went on. I believe my fiancé has lied about his whole life. I found 3 passports in his desk yesterday. They all had his photo, but each one had a different name. I do not know what to do. That old, tight feeling grew in my chest, but this time it was not for me. It was an emotion I recognized instantly. I had listened to this very story 246 times already. I slid a notepad closer, cradled the phone on my shoulder, and began writing. Grace, please listen to me. You are not by yourself. We will help you through this. The first thing is to remain as calm as possible and stay safe. Have you said anything to him? No, I placed them back exactly where they were. He has no idea I know. That is good. You did precisely the right thing. Do not reveal that you know something is wrong. Not now. Can you get to a safe location? Maybe a friend's place or a family member's house? My sister lives about 20 minutes from here. You must head there right now. Just pack a small bag, act as if you are only staying one night. Bring your phone, license, credit cards, and all your cash. As soon as you are safe inside her house, we will get you a lawyer and call the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Can you take pictures of the passports without him seeing you? Grace took a moment to breathe. I believe so. He comes home from work around 6 o'clock. You need to act quickly. Get a clear photo of the front and back of every passport, then send them to an email address I will give you. Once it is sent, you need to delete the email from your sent items and empty the trash. Are you able to do that? Yes. I told her our secure email, said it again to confirm, and then laid out the next actions. Document everything. Keep all of his texts and emails. Do not touch any shared bank accounts before a lawyer advises you to. Grace, you have already completed the most difficult step. You found the courage to see the truth. Let us take over now. When the call was over, I set down the phone and breathed deeply. Eleanor began to stir, so I kissed her soft hair. Nathan stood in the doorway holding 2 coffees. He mouthed the words silently. Another one? I just nodded back. He set a mug on my desk and rested on the doorframe. Are you all right? Yes, I really am. And I meant it completely. That night, I went back to my townhouse on Beacon Hill. I made the choice to stay. I would not let the memory of Alexander push me from the house my parents loved so much. I repainted the living room, purchased new furniture, and put up new art. At last, the house felt like my own again. I carried Elena upstairs, put on her pajamas, and rocked her in the nursery. I started humming a soft lullaby that my mother always sang for me. Elena's eyes started to close. I softly told her, your name is Elena, which means a shining light. I named you for a woman who endured a terrible ordeal and grew even stronger from it. As you age, you realize that women take care of one another. We refuse to let evil win. Family is not just about blood. It is about the people who are there for you when everything falls apart. I gently placed the baby into her crib, covered her with a light blanket, and returned downstairs. 2 photos sat on the fireplace mantel. One was an old picture of my parents on a sailboat, looking joyful and without a worry. The other was from only 3 weeks ago during Elena Petrov's visit with her children, David and Sophia. It was a photo of our entire group on the front steps. You could see me, Nathan, Lauren, Elizabeth, Amy, Diana, Edward, Elena, and her 2 kids. We all had our arms around each other with huge smiles on our faces. We created our own kind of family, one built to endure. Nathan came up behind me with a glass of water. You holding up okay? I offered him a tired but genuine smile. I am. For the first time in a long while, I really am. Mom and Dad would be very proud. We turned so much hurt into something positive. Outside the window, Boston Harbor's lights started to shine as evening arrived. A Morgan maritime vessel was anchored, its freight being moved beneath the dock's bright lamps. The job never stops. My laptop made a sound, telling me a new email had arrived. It was Grace Sullivan. I followed your instructions. The pictures are sent. I am here safely at my sister's house. A Federal Bureau of Investigation agent just phoned me. He told me they have been looking into this guy for months. You saved me. I will never be able to thank you. I shut the laptop, walked back up the stairs, and stopped at the nursery doorway. The baby slept deeply, her small hand resting near her cheek. I could just make out the sound of Nathan's guitar from downstairs. The home felt peaceful and safe. My personal battle had not ended. But tonight, at least one more woman was out of danger. Looking back on everything, I see God sent me three distinct warnings I nearly missed. The first was a text from Nathan one October night that read, God puts people in our lives right when we need them. The second was the vitamin bottle I kept in a box of memories. That was his way of telling me to keep the proof. The third was finding out I was pregnant again. That was his message that this child was my reason to keep going. I could not see his design at the time, but it is perfectly clear to me now. I am asking you, do not make the same errors I did. Pay attention to warning signs, even if you feel lonely or someone is saying everything you want to hear. Never put your name on a document until you have read every single word. Do not allow anyone to cut you off from those who love you. Family betrayal hurts the most when it is from a person you chose to trust. But achieving justice for family is not driven by anger, it is about taking back your life and keeping others safe. Alexander wanted his actions to ruin me. I used them instead to seek justice for my family, founded on doing good, not getting even. There is a huge difference. This is what I discovered. True love will never ask you to give up the people you love. True love will not fake your name on legal papers or try to poison you. And true family, whether you are born with them or create them yourself, will stand by you when your world collapses. The family betrayal taught me who was untrustworthy. The family justice revealed the woman I was meant to become. If this story resonated with you, I would be grateful if you left a comment. Share a moment when you noticed a warning sign you wish you had acted on. I also ask that you share this video with anyone you think should hear this message. For those new here, please subscribe and turn on notifications. You will not want to miss a story that might save someone's life. I appreciate you staying until the very end. I have a final thought to share. The stories on this channel are for educational purposes. If this type of content is not for you, we offer many others you may enjoy. Please be well and stay safe.